Hey, brother.
Hey, brother.
So Halloween's coming up, so I want to talk about A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Okay.
A Nightmare on Elm Street, was it Freddy that made the movies, or was it Robert Englund that made the movies?
Um, I actually think it was Robert Englund because we've had new Freddy movies
Yeah,
and they're not as good.
yeah. So, can we write a Nightmare on Elm Street without Robert Englund? Like, can we make a good one?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like, what happens if you don't have Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger? Can the movie
Yeah,
even be good?
yeah.
I don't I don't think so. I think you
Okay,
I think you go I think you go a different direction and you just go with the idea.
okay. Well, does
Yeah.
that mean what does that mean though? Do you still have Freddy and you just have a different kind of Freddy, or do you axe Freddy altogether?
I would take Freddy out of the movie, and I'd make a
Okay,
Nightmare on Elm Street just about somebody. It's just about someone who's found a way of invading dreams and killing people in their dreams.
okay,
Because
all
yeah,
right.
the original story was. Should we get into the original story? The
Let's get in
original
the
story
original
was.
story.
I don't know. I don't fully remember what it is, but there's some story about this group of people that went through some ridiculous trauma where they were like kind of like kept up. They couldn't sleep because they were in, you know, a ridiculous situation.
Yeah,
Anyway, finally they get to safety and they fall asleep and they die of like heart attacks from the nightmares that they had now that
okay,
they've finally gone to sleep. So this, I think this was the story that inspired Nightmare on Elm Street,
okay,
like someone who comes into your dreams and can kill you in your dreams by just scaring you to death.
right.
I think that is the great idea. And then you mix it with Robert Englund, and it makes for something really great and fun.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
you don't have Robert Englund, you take the idea and you bring something else in, but the idea is still good. So,
Okay,
yeah, I don't know. I would probably do something. It's kind of weird to be like, oh, Nightmare on Elm Street, let's get rid of Freddy Krueger.
right.
But I would do something like maybe there's a guy that they do something like this to. He does something bad. He's a bad guy, so they kind of like torture him by like sleep depriving him, like putting him through this whole process until
Yeah,
eventually he dies like in his sleep from the nightmare, and then this magically allows him to have the ability to now invade people's dreams,
okay,
and he's taking revenge on the now the teenage children of these people who did this thing to him,
right.
kind of like Nightmare on Elm Street.
Well, yeah, but that's kind of what I mean though, is that like this new guy
Yeah.
with this new ability, it's Freddy. I mean, that's not too dissimilar from Freddy.
Yeah, yeah, it's the same idea. Well, it is a Nightmare on Elm Street, but it's like telling like here's the next time somebody found a way of invading dreams to kill
Okay,
people
so it's still a Nightmare on Elm Street,
in universe. Yes,
but it's not Freddy anymore.
but Freddy's not doing it anymore.
But if Robert Englund as Freddy is what made the movies, then how do we make this new guy
Yeah,
like? How do we make it good without Robert Englund? Because it's gonna feel like a rehash. It's gonna feel like, oh, it's Freddy Krueger's daughter, and it's like, and
yeah,
she wears like, red and blue instead of red and green.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Though, like they do that in
yeah,
those rehashes, and it's like, how do we do it without Freddy and still have it be good?
yeah. I think, yeah, maybe you turn it more into a. Have you seen like Jacob's Ladder with
Yeah,
Tim Robbins?
yeah,
So probably one of the better horror films ever made. That's
it's
not
pretty good.
technically a horror film.
Yeah,
Like, and I think you can do something like that. Like Jaws is one of the better horror films ever made that's not technically a horror film.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I think you go more that direction. You turn it more into a psychological drama.
Okay.
And you could even have it where the kids are telling their parents, like, there's a guy coming into my dreams, terrorizing me,
Yeah.
and I don't want to go to sleep. And the parents are like, that sounds like Ted McGillicuddy, the guy we tortured, you know?
This guy, Ted McGillicuddy.
McGillicuddy
that we tortured. Doesn't that sound an awful lot like that
sounds
guy
like
we
Ted
tortured?
McGillicuddy? Oh, your best friend? No, we tortured him. Oh. But there could be a, like, now they're taking the kids to the psychologist and all this other stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And the parents kind of don't believe, like, why would anyone believe, just like in the real world, that, like, somebody's actually invading your dreams? But someone is invading their dreams.
Yeah.
And you could even have it where, like, as an audience member, at the end of it, you're questioning, like, was that real or not? But people did end up dying as a result. And it's like, maybe they died because the parents somehow caused some form of, like, trauma that got imprinted onto the kids, and now the kids are coming of age and having these, like, nightmares of being tortured or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Because they kind of found out, like, your parents did this horrible thing to this guy.
Yeah.
Maybe he's not even a bad guy, Ted McGillicuddy. Maybe he was just a good kid. And the parents were the bad guys. And now they're older and they've matured and they're good people now. But they did something really terrible when they were kids.
See, this is all still sounding a little too much like Freddy to me, though.
I don't want it to necessarily not sound like Freddy, because it is the same.
Because it's still Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just this is the next guy who's...
It's
through
just a new
certain
Freddy.
circumstances. Yeah, he's a new guy. He's the next guy who's been able to invade the dreams.
Yeah. Okay. I'm still having trouble with this.
Okay. Where are you
because,
going
like,
with it?
Well, it's just that the new guy is still going to be a Freddy Krueger, but not Robert Englund. You know what I mean? So it's
he doesn't have to look anything like Freddy, though. He can look like his own thing.
Yeah. But what's interesting about him, or like, what is different, or what is good about this? Because A Nightmare on Elm Street was a good movie. I liked it. It's a good concept.
Yeah.
But I'd say that Robert Englund made the film. And certainly the sequels, like, the sequels wouldn't be good without him.
Oh my! How many sequels are there? Do you know? Have you seen them all?
I've seen them all. I think that there were 8 movies total before they did the remake.
There's 8 movies before the remake?
There's 8 movies, and then there's one of them is it's not Robert Englund as Freddy. It's somebody else as Freddy, but Robert Englund is in the movie playing himself.
Oh, so kind of like
pretty
Fourth
meta.
Walls? Fourth Walls? Yeah.
It's a meta kind of thing, and that's very Wes Craven. Like, he does that. And it wasn't bad. But, like, Freddy was just kind of there. Like, he was just another monster. He was just another, slasher.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I feel like whatever route we take with A Nightmare on Elm Street with no Freddy is still just going to feel like another slasher film because it's not Freddy. So I almost feel like there needs to be kind of an added element or a different concept. So in the remake,
Okay.
they addressed something that I actually really liked. There's this thing called, like, micronaps, where if you're awake for several days at a time, your brain starts to hallucinate.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like a dream, like a waking dream, because it's trying to get rest while you're awake.
Yeah.
So, like, they hit this point, it's kind of like a breaking point, where Freddy's able to see them while they're awake because they're having micronaps, because they're dreaming while they're awake. I kind of like the idea of maybe this new Freddy is not someone who is dead, but maybe like someone who is currently alive
Oh.
and is just a serial killer and has discovered a way to get away with it. And maybe he is a psychologist, so he's like trying to like medicate people to keep them
Yeah.
awake, so that he can invade their micronaps, so he can invade them while they're still awake as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that would kind of be like in a different concept a little bit, you know? It kind of
Yeah.
like add to it a little bit, so maybe you wouldn't mind as much that it's not Freddy.
So you almost want to not make this a Nightmare on Elm Street film.
It's, I mean, you know, it's still
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street, but like, I don't want to make it a remake of a Nightmare on Elm Street
Yeah.
just without Freddy, because then it's gonna feel like every other slasher film that you've ever seen, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like if it's still within the universe of a Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's like these are the rules,
Yeah.
but like here's somebody else who figured out how to do what Freddy did. What makes him interesting?
Yeah. That actually could be kind of cool, because you could have this guy be like a Freddy Krueger fanatic, where he's like researched Freddy Krueger,
Yeah.
and through researching and all this other stuff, discovered like how he's actually doing it to a certain
Yeah.
degree, you know.
Yeah.
But he can only do it during the micro naps, because he's like, yeah, still alive.
Ooh, I kind of like that. So it's like in order for him to do it, he has to keep himself awake. So he's like sleep deprived and is like driving himself crazy as he's doing it.
Yes, he has to micro nap, and and then while he's micro napping, he can invade other people's micro naps.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's been awake
Oh,
for like 3 days and he's
yeah,
just like driving himself even crazier. I kind of like that. I kind of
yeah,
like that. Yeah, because you can make him like sort of unhinged.
yeah. And
That
he
could be
could
fun.
be. Here's the cool thing. I think you make him somebody who's, um, gosh, um, you make him like a kind of like Stephen Hawking, where maybe he's like in a wheelchair, can't really move,
Okay.
all this stuff,
Yeah.
you know, um, because then
Okay.
like when he's micro napping, now he's got all of his facilities.
Yeah.
And also like when somebody's there with him, and you've seen this guy the whole time, where it's like this guy can't walk, he's like has trouble kind of like, you know, with his fine
Yeah.
motor skills, all this other stuff. Now like we're in the micro nap, and he's like kind of still there in the chair, and he like gets up out of the chair, you know,
Oh,
and it's like scary, like
that could be.
what is, because like this weak,
Yeah.
feeble, like, and maybe you could even have that scene where like one of the guys who's like one of his like aides, who's like kind of like picking him up out of the chair and like putting him in the bed, you know,
Yeah.
and now like they're in the micro nap, and now he's getting up and
Yeah.
grabbing this guy, you know,
Yeah.
and
That's
it's like the
actually,
flip.
I like that a lot.
Yeah,
Because that could be a really creepy kind of reveal too. It's like
yeah,
if the victim sees him in real life for the first time
yeah,
and sees that he's infirmed,
yes,
and then like he slowly starts to gain his faculties,
yeah,
just because like he's getting sleepier and he's been up for 3 days,
yeah,
and he just like stands up out of the wheelchair. Like that could be a really creepy looking scene.
yes.
I like it. I think,
that's,
yeah,
that's,
yeah.
that's
See,
yeah, there you go. Okay, there we go.
I'd watch that version of A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, and he's got a glove with claws.
Yeah, he's got one of those toe shoes,
Yeah.
and each toe has a knife
He's
on
got
it.
yeah, the toe shoes. And he's got a hat and striped.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know if you need to have some kind of like interesting weapon. I mean,
I
probably.
think I think
He's just got
him.
like blades in his spokes.
Yeah, I actually think the scary thing is that like juxtaposition of somebody who like, you know, can't even really like lift a bottle of water properly.
Right.
to their mouth. Somebody who's just struggling with that. To
Yeah.
now, this guy just gets up out of his chair, grabs you, and can just rip you apart.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that is the scary thing. That
Yeah.
once he has the power, how he uses it
Yeah.
is so overboard.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that can work really well. I think that
Right?
could be really creepy.
Yeah. How does he
And there
keep
could be
them
some
awake,
very cool
though?
visuals.
Does it
What?
how does he keep them awake? He just drugs them or something, or he's giving them something to keep them awake?
Yeah, I mean, before I thought of him as, before you mentioned the idea of him being infirmed, I was thinking of him being more like he is the psychologist. He's the therapist, and like they're
Yeah.
talking about these problems they're having while they're dreaming,
Yeah.
and he's giving them medication to keep them awake, um, under the guise of like until we figure out what's going on with your dreams, like stay awake, and he's just
Yeah.
medicating them. Um,
He could still be that guy.
he could still be that guy, yeah.
Yeah. So long as he can, yeah. Because he could
I
still
think it
just
could
be.
work.
Yeah, he could still just be talking, And I mean, it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be. It doesn't have to be some kind of an
MS.
ailment. It could just be like maybe he was in like a car accident because
Yeah.
like when he was in like. And you could, I don't know if this is like a revenge story or not, or if you don't even want to go in that direction.
If the Ted McGillicuddy, like he was tortured to the point of paralysis.
Yeah, like do we do something like that?
I mean, we could. We could go down that path. It might feel a little bit like a rehash, but but I don't know. I mean, there's not really a lot that you can do. There's been so many ideas done in horror that like there's not a lot that you can do that won't feel like a rehash.
Well, if he's following the Freddy rulebook though, and if the Freddy rulebook says one of the things is that you have to have some level of like hatred.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like for this person, then it would make sense that that this wrongdoing, there has to be some event of wrongdoing.
Yeah. Like
and
Freddy
like kind
doesn't just invade everyone's dreams.
Yes.
Like he's invading specifically the kids of these parents that burned him.
Yeah. And it's like kind of like this, Yeah, it just goes beyond just something normal, like just some. He's not a serial killer. He's looking for specific revenge against specific people.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a nice guy.
Yeah, he's
maybe he's not a nice guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get what you mean though. If depending on what the accident is, it could just be the people that he sees responsible for putting him in the chair.
Yeah.
That could work. And then you would just have to come up with what that accident is, which is kind of detail. I mean, not super important what the accident is, unless it determines how he looks in his dreams, the way that it did with Freddy. Like Freddy's a burn victim. That's why Freddy looks like that.
Yeah.
But if this guy is still alive, then it might not really apply.
Yeah.
Trying to think of the accident.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what it is. Like, what would it be that, would sort of also make kind of like, maybe like if he does use a weapon, the weapon makes sense. And Freddy's weapon doesn't really make any sense other than it's just cool looking.
Yeah. It's just a hand.
Yeah. Yeah,
He's
or
a really
this
big
guy,
Michael Jackson fan.
I feel like the more normal he looks, the more normal and like almost even meek he looks, the creepier it could be. Kind of like a Norman Bates type situation.
Yeah.
Where it's like Norman Bates just feels so meek and helpless.
Yeah.
Then like that switch happens where it's like, no, this is somebody really dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be pretty creepy. Like Willard.
Yeah. Yeah. Willard's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. How many
Yeah,
versions of Willard are there? Two?
I think only two.
Yeah.
There's that first one was with I think Ed Begley Jr. and then the second one was with Crispin Glover.
Yeah.
And Crispin Glover made for a great Willard.
He was a good Willard. Yeah. But
Yeah,
the dad from Back to the Future, Crispin Glover.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He does a good job with those like kind of those
Yeah, the
quirky
creepy.
roles,
He like
creepy
Norman
roles.
Bates. He could play a really good Norman Bates.
Yeah, I think he would have done
Um,
a better job than Vince Vaughn. But
oh. Yeah, Vince Vaughn was Norman Bates in the remake for
yeah,
Psycho. What a
yeah,
what
interesting
an
pick.
interesting cast job all around.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I think I'm satisfied with A Nightmare on Elm Street. What we've come up with, I feel like it's enough that if we wanted
Yeah.
to sit down and flesh out a script,
Yeah.
we
Agreed.
could.
How many people, give me a percentage, would be mad that Freddy Krueger isn't in it?
I mean,
90?
yeah.
You know?
Like all of
Like,
them.
but it's like, it's not going to be good if it's not, the original
Yeah,
guy. So,
yeah, yeah. It's true because the Nightmare on Elm Street remake I thought was actually really good, and the guy who played Freddy was Rorschach from The Watchmen.
yeah.
I thought he did a really good job,
Yeah.
but he wasn't Robert Englund.
No. Yeah.
And it's like, oh, all the complaints that I heard about it was like, oh, he didn't look like Freddy, he didn't like feel like
Yeah.
Freddy, and it's like, yeah, he's not Robert Englund.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, you're used to this guy playing that role.
Yeah. So it's like, unless we get somebody who's just going to be doing an imitation,
Mhm.
which I'm not going to enjoy,
No.
I think you've got to change it. You have to come up with a new concept. You have to come up with something that's like, um, I mean, I don't want to compare it to James Bond, but something like James Bond where there
Yeah.
are multiple different villains that leave an impression on you.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, here's the Nightmare on Elm Street universe, and Freddy is that iconic villain, and here is possibly another one. And I
Yeah.
think that's the way you have to approach it.
Yeah.
You can't just be a Freddy clone. Um, speaking of which, speaking of expanding on universes,
Okay.
we're going to jump over to another franchise, Halloween.
Okay.
There was Halloween 1, and then Halloween
Yeah.
2 was the sequel,
Yeah.
and then there was Halloween 3, Season of the Witch.
The Witch. Yeah.
Which was actually a pretty good horror film,
Yes.
but it didn't have Michael Myers in it, and that was kind of the main complaint. And a lot of people didn't like that there was a Halloween movie, Halloween 3, and there was no Michael Myers. So they kind of backpedaled and did Halloween 4, Michael Myers Returns.
Yeah.
I really liked Halloween 3, and I think the original plan was for there to be, the Halloween movies would be like an anthology, so it could be a different horror story and a different horror movie every single time. It would just be a part of the Halloween franchise.
Yeah.
So it would be like Are You Afraid of the Dark, or like any TV show, Twilight Zone, and just different episodes. So my question is, if Halloween 3 was well received,
Yeah.
and people didn't complain about there being no Michael, and they continued with their plan for Halloween 4,
Yeah.
where would you take it? We're not going back to Michael. We did Michael. Michael was 1 and 2, and
Yeah.
that was good. We did Season of the Witch. Season of the Witch was good. What do we do for 4? What direction
Yeah.
would you go in?
It's such a good question. Yeah, because it's basically like we're just making movies set during Halloween.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was one of those people where the first time I saw Halloween 3, I kept waiting for Michael Myers. And I was mad that there was no Michael Myers. And then years later, when I rewatched it, I was like, this is a good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should have been called Halloween 3 No Michael Myers. Just
Yeah.
just enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not going to make like Season of the Witch Part 2. right?
No.
Because that's like a completed story,
Yeah.
and you can make up your own mind about how it ends. Because at the end, there's a broadcast that's going on, and anyone who's wearing the mask is going to die,
Right.
and um, it's
Cliffhanger.
ambiguous. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Spoilers for a movie that came out in the 80s.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it by
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's almost like what do they do for the next one to make it kind of a new, now there's another movie set in Halloween.
Yeah.
I do wish they did that rather than
I do
return
too.
Michael Myers, because none of the other ones were good.
Correct.
It's never been good. The first one's good.
Right.
You could say the second one's good. I think the
Yeah.
first one's better if the second one doesn't exist.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
You know, but the first one's good. The second one's good. The third one's
Yeah.
good. Season
Yeah.
of the Witch. So, yeah, I don't. What is the idea then? Do you have an idea for like another Halloween
I
oriented
don't.
film?
And I think the problem is that it's so open ended
Mhm.
that there. I feel like there are two questions that. One of them is which direction would you go in if it were up to you, and the other is which direction do you think John Carpenter would have gone in if it were up to him.
Yeah,
And
then I almost know the answer.
okay.
So the next one would have been vampires,
Oh,
because he made a vampire film.
he. Which
He
one
made
was
vampires. John Carpenter's Vampires.
Oh, you're okay. Yeah. As soon
That's
as you
his
say
movie.
John Carpenter's Vampires. Oh yes, now I
Oh yeah,
remember.
they all covered that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he made that with Ed Wood, and it's got the guy from Karate Kid
James
3.
Wood.
James Wood. So yeah, James Wood's in it.
Yeah.
The guy from Karate Kid 3, who's the bad guy in one of the bad guys in Karate Kid 3, I think. He
Terry
plays the
Silver.
vampire. Yeah, he plays the
Okay.
vampire.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. You know what's interesting is that John Carpenter's horror films that he made throughout his career may very well have just been new installments in the Halloween series.
I know, because The Thing could have been one of them
The
too.
Thing, yeah. Like
The
he
Thing-
probably had ideas for like these could all be a part of the Halloween series,
Yes.
and then like they went back to Michael Myers and he's like, well, I can still make these movies.
Yes. All you do for The Thing is
Yeah.
you decorate the facility with Halloween
Yeah.
decorations.
Yeah,
And
That's
it's a
it.
Halloween, and you don't even ever have to mention that it's Halloween.
Yeah.
And that's it.
yeah,
And now it's a Halloween. You could do Halloween The Thing.
yeah.
That's actually, I think, Halloween The Thing, I actually am more excited about than The Thing by itself. Is that weird? That if The Thing was a part of the Halloween, like, anthology.
I mean, does it change at all? It
doesn't change
at
anything.
all.
It doesn't
just
change
has
anything.
Halloween decorations.
Other than John Carpenter seemed to be making different movies that if they
Yeah.
were linked to the holiday Halloween probably would have done even better than they did.
Maybe, yeah.
Right?
I mean, yeah, that's possible. Yeah, Halloween
Did-
6, Escape from New York.
Did John Carpenter do Halloween 3, or was that just a totally separate thing?
I don't think he directed it. He I think had like a producer credit, so he probably had some say in which direction they go in.
Yeah.
But no, I think that that someone else ended up directing. He directed the first two. But yeah, that's a good point too. Like if he kind of saw Halloween as more an avenue for other budding horror directors to kind of make their name.
Yeah.
Because Halloween was an indie film. Like he made a movie called I think Dark Star. And that was like a student project, and he did that while he was in film school. And then he did Halloween after that, and it was an indie film. So he might have kind of been sympathetic to indie filmmakers and kind of trying to get like horror directors will make a movie in the Halloween universe, and it'll kind of be their launch point.
Yeah.
And if that is the direction that he was going to go in, then it might not have been his movies. Like it might not have been like vampires or The Thing.
Yeah.
It would have just been a different premise, whatever the next horror film premise is. Um, Michael Myers being the slasher film, they're not going to do a slasher film again.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know what you would call Season of the Witch. Is it like a conspiracy? Like what horror genre, horror subgenre do you call that?
Yeah.
Um,
Um, I think it's like I think it still falls into the kind of like paranoia, right?
yeah, as it feels like Invasion of the Body Snatchers,
Yeah.
but like it's not the same concept. But that's kind of what it feels like. It feels like They Live,
Yeah.
just
Didn't
like
didn't
broad scale conspiracy.
John Carpenter also did The Fog, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. Um, I don't know. Did he want to be a horror director, or was that just thrust upon him because he had a successful horror film?
Um, that's a good question because Dark Star was not really a horror film. It was a sci-fi. Um, so it might not have occurred to him at first. Um, but I mean, he made stuff that wasn't horror. He made Big Trouble in Little China, and
Oh,
he made
yeah, that's right.
Escape from New York.
Yeah,
So I don't know. Like he might have just wanted to do kind of genre films. He wanted to do action, thrillers, and horror, and that's just. I mean, that's his wheelhouse. He does an incredible job of making a movie that feels like nothing else. And nobody's really able to make a movie that feels like a John Carpenter film.
yeah. I think, yeah, I'm trying to think of like a movie that feels like a Carpenter film, and I think I was gonna say like Precinct 13, but I think that is a John Carpenter film.
It is.
Is that what it's called?
Assault on
Something like
Precinct 13.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
pretty sure that's
I was
John
like, you know, it
Carpenter.
feels like a John Carpenter film, a John Carpenter film. Um, yeah, yeah, no, I think yeah, he does kind of have that feel to him. I think there's a couple guys that have that. Like Peter Jackson has a really unique look and feel, and Tim Burton
Yeah,
and Sam Raimi.
yeah,
Yeah, where you're just like that. Those are definitely that's a shot only Sam Raimi would do, where you're
yeah.
like following someone shoots an arrow and you're following
Just
the arrow.
following the arrow. Yeah,
Yeah,
for like
he,
way longer than you should.
yeah, he'll do. Yeah, he'll do that
Like it's
too.
not like that shot hasn't been done. It's just that like he follows it for
Yeah,
like 3 seconds, and like every
yeah,
other director cuts after like half a second.
yeah,
That's it. But he's
yeah.
like, you're just like following the axe spinning through the air. Yeah, it is great. He does a great job. I mean, there is something about a director having a distinct style that is kind of lacking in modern film. Not to keep talking about this, I feel like I bring this up a lot, but I saw
Yeah.
a movie recently called Sting, and it's about this giant spider,
Okay.
and it was really good. I liked it a lot. I
Yeah.
saw, I guess, kind of like mixed reviews, or it didn't have like the highest rating, but it felt like a classic horror film.
Yeah.
Um, and it came out this year. It came out 2024. Um, and there were some shots in it that kind of like stuck in my head,
Yeah.
where just like you see whatever the girl in the foreground, and then you see like the spider coming down in the background,
Yeah.
or like light from the outside has like a spider's shadow on the girl's face, and I was like, that was a cool shot,
Yeah.
and I can't remember a recent film where I felt like that was a cool shot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they don't try and do a cool shot anymore because they feel like it's dated or it's cheesy.
Mhm.
But it's like, dude, this movie Sting, that's gonna stick with me. And like that classic horror movie, like that's kind of what that's why everybody still talks about them. You know, they're distinct.
Yeah,
There's something cool about them. There's something different about them.
yeah. It's the yeah. Like, well, in Halloween, they have
Yeah,
that shot where I think the closet door is open and it's
yeah,
completely dark in there. And then they have a light dimmer go on, where
yeah,
slowly now you're seeing and it makes it feel like your eyes are adjusting,
yeah,
like your eyes would normally adjust in the dark. Only you're
yeah,
seeing it in the thing. So it's what it's doing is it takes you as a human being a certain amount of time to look at something and know what it is that you're looking at.
yeah,
And while you're
yeah,
doing that, you're like, wait a second, am I seeing Michael Myers in there? You
yeah.
know? I mean, this is an example kind of like where the director's very intentionally kind of doing it.
Right.
And I'm trying to think of a good example. I can't think of a good example other than the Truman Show, because the Truman Show has a shot where he's on the boat.
Yeah.
He's going across the sea,
Yeah.
the ocean, and there's the wall
Yeah.
that
The
looks
barrier.
like more. It looks like more ocean and more sky, but there's a barrier
Yeah.
there, and he's
Yeah.
just heading towards it. And it takes, I don't know, 4 or 5 seconds of him just going, and
Yeah.
you, the audience member, are looking at it, and you're like, something looks weird about that.
Yeah.
Wait a
It's
second, is
casting a
that
shadow?
yeah? Like, is that a wall, a fake wall, like a movie set wall?
Yeah.
And then he hits it, and
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
And you remember it because they took
Yeah.
the time to let you look at it and figure it out for yourself. Of
Yeah.
like, that doesn't look right. I think that's a movie wall. And he hits
Yeah.
the movie wall. And
Yeah.
now you're rewarded for having the thought. And it stays in your head for the rest of your life. And if you
Yes.
don't do that, it doesn't stay in anyone's head.
Yeah. Yeah. It is it's interesting because these movies are not super well received, at least critically, when they first come out. And like
Yeah.
Halloween wasn't really well received when it first came out. And he did like a pre-screening at a film school, and
Yeah.
one of the students like stood up and was like, "How can you make a film like this? Like, why didn't you make an intelligent film?" And
Yeah.
John Carpenter just stood up and walked out.
Yeah.
Like he's like, "All right, I'm not answering these kids' questions." It's like they don't understand film, and I don't blame him. Hitchcock was the same way. Um, Almost every single one of his films was like panned by critics, and he would say like, yeah, like a critic will go into one of my films with the title of their article already written, because they know the name of my movie is The Birds, and so
Yeah.
they're like, oh, The Birds is for the birds, like they already have that written. They're going
Yeah.
into it expecting to dislike it.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people fail to realize that these movies that are entertaining
Yeah.
are actually great pieces of artistic intellect.
Yeah.
Just because of the way that they're shot and the way that they are manipulating an audience into feeling a certain way and thinking a certain way, to a degree where you remember it years later and you're still talking about it with your friends decades later.
Yeah.
I mean, The Birds is a great example. Like there are a lot of scenes in The Birds that just kind of like stick with you. And like, I mean, the scene that always comes to mind for me is the jungle gym. When the jungle gym just gets like a couple birds behind her,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like it's a long scene.
Yeah.
And there's the children singing in the background, and I can remember this stupid song that I hate. I remember it because it's such a memorable scene.
What is the song?
I am not gonna sing it.
What do you mean? 100 Bridges Falling Down?
But it's no.
Ring Around the
No,
Rosie?
it's like flippity floppity now or something. I don't know what it's called. But I remember how it goes. And Hitchcock actually had extra verses written for the song, extra verses
Yeah.
that didn't exist because the song wasn't long
Oh.
enough. And he
Yeah.
needed the scene to last a long time so that you would
Yeah.
feel tense.
Give me a couple lines of the song.
Get out of here. You're focusing on the wrong thing.
What? Oh. What key is it in?
So yeah, one bird lands, and then like a couple more land.
Yeah.
And then she sees a bird, and she follows it with her eyes, and it lands on the jungle gym, and there's like 70 of them.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a very long scene, and there's this reveal of like all of a sudden there's tons of birds, and man, it really sticks with you. They tried shooting that now, it'd be deemed as like kind of cheesy, and The Birds was panned critically, but it's like that's brilliant filmmaking. I'm still talking about it.
Well, I think some things, it's seen as boring. I think is the thing. It's seen as like that build up to that moment. It's like, can you make that build up more exciting? And it's like, well, yeah, I can just dangle keys in front of you. But you're not going to remember it.
Yeah.
And it's nothing. It's not going to invoke anything other than a surface level emotion from you.
Yeah. The reveal is not going to be powerful.
Yeah. It's not going to be something that just sticks with you for the rest of your life.
Right.
You know? I can't stop thinking of, you'd be a psycho if you like Psycho. You know, I can't stop thinking of those now.
Yeah. Well, that's,
The only time I want to see Rear Window is in the rear window of my car as I'm driving away from the theater.
Yeah. A film like Psycho, which is intellectually like very complex, and artistically very complex, it would be deemed by critics as kind of a lowbrow film because it's just a slasher. You know, it's just like, oh, it's just violence. And it's like, okay, you're an idiot. You know? And like that's true of a lot of critics. And I think, honestly, that's why you see a disparage between like the critic rating and the audience rating on like Rotten Tomatoes. For some movies, you'll have an audience rating that's like 97% and the critic rating is like 30%. And it's like, that's because the critics are wrong. Like the critics are morons and they're looking for like...
Well, yeah. What is that though? That's the real thing. Because it's like, if the audience is saying we like this, it is therefore done its job.
Correct.
As a piece of entertainment.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, like if you're looking at a painting, and if the goal of a painting is to make you think about whatever it is, the emotion or something like that, and you think of the emotion, and the audience is saying, I like that it made me think of something and it made me feel something, and a critic is saying, but it didn't make you think of the right thing or feel the right thing. That's what they're doing, right?
That is exactly what they're doing. Yes. They're doing that. I think that it's probably true that a lot of critics are, they started out trying to be filmmakers. And there's this thing that I see with a lot of indie filmmakers where they try and make something that feels intellectual, because what's more important to them than entertaining an audience is showing everybody how smart they are. Showing everybody how smart they think they are, you know? So they'll do something that's deep, and they'll do something that's like philosophical. And that, a lot of critics don't realize this, and a lot of indie filmmakers don't realize this, but that is very, very easy to do if you make a boring film. It is extremely difficult to make a shallow film that is actually entertaining. Entertaining an audience is extremely difficult to do. Critics don't realize this. I think that critics are looking for something philosophically deep, that feels intellectual, that feels like if I sat down in a lecture hall in Harvard, I would hear them recite this movie. But it's like, that's easy. You know, I can quote a textbook all day. I've seen Good Will Hunting too. Like, you know, he's like quoting a textbook and saying like, this isn't what makes somebody intelligent. And like, that's not the point. And like, this is what's actually difficult. Like, think for yourself. And that's I think what the disconnect is. I think that the critics or the intellects that are looking for something intellectual, and the audience is looking to be entertained. The directors that are good at what they do, they know how to entertain an audience because it's difficult. It's difficult to pull that off.
Yeah. Is it bad that every time I hear Good Will Hunting, I think of that scene from the Kevin Smith, like Jay and Violet and Silent Bob movie where they have Good Will Hunting 2, hunting season? And the guy's like, I've read books you've never even heard of. Like, and he just blows them away with the shotgun. Like,
that's the
brilliant.
best part of the movie.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
To get the actual guy back. The actual guy. It's
the best part of the movie.
Great. But yeah, I think it is. I think it is difficult. It's why I always pick the 80s as the best decade for films. Because in my opinion, for me, if someone's like the 70s is the best decade or the 60s is the best decade, and I'm like, oh, those are the ones that you watch the most. Those are the ones you have the most fun with. Those are the ones that are the most entertaining for you. And if they don't say yes, it's like, that's not your decade then.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're watching RoboCop every year, but you're not watching The Godfather every year, guess what? Yeah. You're an 80s person. You're not like a 60s person or whenever The Godfather came out.
72.
72.
I get that. I think that for me, I picked the 70s because it has a lot of influence, probably more influence on filmmaking and on cultural zeitgeist, and a lot of stuff that's 80s kind of started in the 70s. You know, like Rocky feels very 80s. It started in the 70s. There are a lot of slashers in the 80s, but like Halloween was a 70s movie. I think it was 78. So yeah, like there's a lot of stuff that kind of started in the 70s and then continued into the 80s. So that's kind of part of it for me too, I think.
I think
I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe
I think if you're talking about the best, you know, because when's The Exorcist? 70?
70, yeah. I remember 77, I think.
What about The Shining? Is that
80? 1980.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going for like the best films, 70s is gonna be. Man, that's a tough one to beat. You know,
it's gonna be hard to beat.
But I mean, I would even go back. I think Lawrence of Arabia. I freaking love Lawrence of Arabia. I think that's like one of the best films ever made. I think it does what Ben-Hur does. Plus, it never has a scene that doesn't look real. Because Ben-Hur has a couple scenes where you're like, that's not really you riding the chariot around the Colosseum. There's a couple of those scenes where like you can tell like it's just like on a sound stage and they just have like a background on a projector behind them and it looks weird. Like, Lawrence of Arabia doesn't have any of those scenes. It always looks like that's a dude going full speed on a camel with 1,000 guys behind him, and it looks like there's an actual 1,000 guys behind him. Like they actually just did that shot, right?
I think so.
Like none of it's on a sound stage. It just looks like the whole thing is shot legitimately, and so
I heard it was difficult to get that shot specifically because camels, it takes them a long time to accelerate. So they all start out just kind of like basically walking, and it just takes them forever to like get to full speed.
They've had humans racing camels. I think they actually had little people racing camels. They had a little people relay around like a lap, you know, just like a 400 against the camel, and I think they won. Because it takes the camel so long. So, I mean, like, you as a human can outrun a camel for the first, like, 400 yards.
First 400 meters,
before this thing starts, like... I mean, once it picks up speed, it's going to, it's an animal, it's going to beat you, but...
Oh, man.
For a while.
That's the new tortoise and hare right there.
Yeah, well, they always do that kind of stuff. They'll have, like, the sumo wrestler versus, like, an orangutan, and the orangutan will, like...
Dude, that was the funniest thing I've ever seen.
The orangutan's not even trying.
Yeah, it's a sumo wrestler doing a tug of war with an orangutan that's half his weight, and the orangutan's just sitting there, looks bored, almost like he doesn't know what's going on, and he like looks at the rope and goes, whoop, and the sumo wrestler flies into the water. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen.
It's so weird how weak we are. Why did we end up so weak as an animal? How did this happen?
I don't know.
You think like physical strength would have like aided us in some way?
Yeah, you think like evolution would have given us a little bit of muscle.
I know. Guess not.
Yeah.
They're like, you don't need that. You don't need that for walking. You're a walking species. That's what you are. Or a good traveling species. That's really what like our thing is.
Yeah.
We're just good at moving. Like, we'll just walk at a leisurely pace for a really long time. We're good at that.
We can travel in every single way that any other animal could, but not as well as any other animal. Like literally every other animal's better at it than we are. But,
I think 2 legs though is more efficient. Like it's not faster, it's not better balance, but it actually is less energy spent per unit of movement. So like we're just a good leisurely pace traveling species.
Yeah. We are an efficient design is what we are. Stupid design. I don't know if I have another topic. Do I have another topic? I don't know if I have another topic.
Well, there is always the like, what's the Halloween film that hasn't been made?
Oh, yeah. Like we need a horror film. Like we need a like whatever this film is that's never been made before. Horror edition.
Yeah. It's like, what's that? We need a horror film that has a mummy in it that comes to life. I mean, I know they've done this, but that's the idea.
They've done that, yeah. But yeah, I actually have had an idea.
Really?
For what I think would be kind of an interesting horror film. The thought was like a huge aquarium, just a place of business, and it's after hours, so they close out all of the guests leave, and it's just the people who work there that are closing up. And one of these like giant tanks completely like cracks and just floods the entire place. And it shorts out the electricity, like all the lights go out, and their place of work is now like in waist deep water.
Yeah.
So they're trying to figure out like, how do we get out of here? How do we turn the like electricity back on? And they know that there's a bunch of deadly sea creatures just like inside this waist deep water all throughout the aquarium.
Yeah.
So there's like a shark in there somewhere, and there's like, like Portuguese man of war, like the jellyfish that are like super, super venomous. And they're just like the employees that work there. They're trying to like, whatever. They're trying to get out in the dark, not knowing where these creatures are, but knowing that they're there.
Yeah, that's actually a good one. Yeah, I think that's really good, because you can do some really creepy stuff with it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had like one of those like 8-foot octopuses, that thing could kill you. That thing could totally kill you.
Yeah.
And those, I'm surprised no one's really done like a crazy octopus. Have they done the crazy octopus film?
They've done giant squids.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's really the same thing.
I think the octopus is creepier than the squid.
Yeah.
Because it feels smarter.
Yeah.
And there's something about that. But so you have like, you just have like some like tiger shark, bull shark like swimming around now.
Yeah.
And you're like trying to get out of this place.
Yeah. Like I feel like that could be a movie that would just, it's one of those movies that you'd be tense the entire time you're watching it, because like anytime they need to get anywhere, like if they're like standing on desks, like they have to get somewhere, they have to jump into the water.
Yes.
And like they're The opening scene could just be like, these are the creatures. Like, here's all the
Yeah.
stuff that's in there, and then that aquarium busts and just floods the entire place. It's like, well, now they're everywhere.
Let me ask this question.
Okay.
So if there's water, and then there's a door, and you're trying to open the door towards you, and the water is going to be flowing out now, you can't open that door, right? Because the pressure of the water flowing out is actually going to shut it, right? Isn't that kind of how it works? Like if you're in a car and it's submerged and there's water on both sides, you can open the door. But once there's only water on one side, you can't open the door, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that you're right. I think that the only way they'd really be able to get out is like through breaking a window.
Yeah. Or going through the roof or something.
Those aquarium windows are pretty heavy duty. So getting through one of them would be damn near impossible. But yeah, I think it's something like a square meter of water is like 2 tons or something like that.
Oh.
So it's like it doesn't take a lot of water to just completely seal a door. Where if you try to open it, like it's not gonna move. You're not.
Don't worry, guys. I got the orangutan over here to help me open this door. The orangutan's just like chilling.
Sumo wrestler's like, I got this. He can't move it at all. The orangutan shoves him out of the way.
Yeah, but yeah, there's like all sorts of like deadly snakes too, like venomous snakes.
Yeah. I mean, dude, sea creatures are creepy, man. I mean, like, you make horror movies about sharks all the time.
Yeah.
You make horror movies that take place in the sea. I think that this is just kind of like, that personal, where it feels like you're in the boarded up house and there's like zombies coming and there's aliens coming. Like it would have that kind of feel where it's just like it's all the employees after hours and they're stuck in their place of work and there's just this waist deep water with all this creepy deadly stuff in it.
Yeah. Do you have the one guy who kind of knows everything there because he's an employee? So every time they're gonna try, they're gonna try and open the door, and he's like, "You're not gonna be able to open the door. It's 2,000 pounds of pressure." Everybody, he's doing that while they're trying to open it, and they're like, "Shut up, Ted," and they're like trying to get it open.
McGillicuddy.
Yeah,
is that his name? Ted McGillicuddy.
Yes, Ted McGillicuddy. And then he's
middle name exposition.
At some point, he's like, "The way out of here." The shark gets him.
Yeah, the guy who knows everything, first guy to die.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be creepy. I'd like to see that movie.
Yeah, that would be a good horror film.
Yeah. Well, I think that those are some good pages. So until next time, I'll see you later, brother.
Bye, brother.